You are listening to We Are the Compassionate Revolution. I'm your podcast host, therapist, author, boundaries guide, Molly Moon. If you are a compassionate person and you want to know your worth, set better boundaries, live from your truth, and operate in your fullness, then I am so glad you've joined us. You ready? Let's get started. Welcome to this episode of We Are the Compassionate Revolution, and I'm so happy to introduce you all to our special guest today, Taikeya Johnson, who is a treasure of a human being, gifted, and somebody who has a focus related to using your voice that is so important for compassionate people that I had to ask her on. And I know we're set to have an amazing time talking together. So Taikeya, would you introduce yourself to the listeners and tell everybody a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Thank you so much, Molly, for having me on. I love you. We'll talk a little bit more as to how I met you, but I just thank God for you. My name is Taikeya Johnson, like she said, but I like to be called Taikeya J. J just has so many meanings for me, especially when I talk about poetry and expression. I am a sister. I am a family historian. I am a prophetic voice. I am a creative, a poet. I am a sister. I love saying that. And there's so much more to me, but most of all, I am a voice that cries out for those who haven't heard themselves. Because I always found that people didn't always receive truth. And I think truth needs to be spoken about because there's so many people that are being hurt under it. And then there's so much beauty that's within truth as well. And so while I've listed those roles of who I am, like I said, I'm a voice that cries out to be heard and for others to be heard as well.
I have full body chills. I know you all see why Taikeya is on here today. Just saying. Would you take us back to a younger Taikeya, still in school, struggling with whatever it was she was struggling with? Bring us back to that time period in your life when you first met poetry, because that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Younger Taikeya, she was inquisitive, observant, and compassionate at heart as well as empathetic. I would watch TV and I would hear the news, and the thing about the news is that they will always talk about something negative, but it would always make me cry to just hear about different people's experiences, whether they were manipulated, whether they were lost, like their parents left them, whether they were impoverished or they didn't have food. And so at the heart of little Taikeya, I was wondering, like, what is going on here? It was like so many societal pressures where, being in school, I would be told from like teachers, friends, even enemies and family in terms of what I should expect out of life. One of the things that I was told in junior high school was most people don't graduate because they get pregnant. And so while there was always power within little Taikeya in terms of understanding that this is some of the things I like and these are some of the things that I don't like, being able to identify those things, there was also some questioning as to what would my life turn out to be, considering so many other people kind of like fell through the cracks of the society pressures.
It's almost like, here's the picture. Basically, it's probably going to be negative. There are no solutions for that. Expect this. And what an awful place to be. Will you bring us into when poetry came on the scene for you?
As I mentioned, in terms of me being very observant, I talk about this in our boot camp because I am also one of the coaches for Molly and I have a poetry cafe session.
Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. We'll talk more about that later. It's good.
But
Anyways.
About I mean, I've had so many different facets of being introduced to poetry. One of them was having an uncle who rapped, and he would be like, "Come on, T, let me hear you rap." You know what I mean? And I would try, but then when I would recite it, it never came out in the same cadence. And so then I began to see that it was a poem as opposed to a rap. Initially, I didn't think that my words sounded compelling, so I would rip up the paper and throw it away because I wanted to be able to memorize it. And what happened was a couple of years down the line, I was in high school and I had this English teacher, shout out Camilla. uh, she gave us this assignment called I Am What I Am. And when I wrote that poem, it was like my heart started to sing because I realized that I could express myself in so many different facets in terms of like what I saw, what I didn't like. It really gave my voice a power where I would not be judged. Because in poetry, it's a susceptible area where you can go to certain groups or organizations or different types of like cultures, and they want to hear what you have to say. So there's this freedom within that. And so with me finding poetry, it came through first trying to rap, but then secondly, it came from being able to express myself in the poem, I Am What I Am. And I love this so much because it fit me. I wasn't trying hard. It just flowed.
It
And
just
so
felt right.
it felt right. And then one other aspect, poetry, was introduced to me in the silence. When I thought that no one understood me, I found a love where I felt like poetry was talking back to me.
Oh my goodness. Because it does, it can. It's almost moving into a different brain state, I think. I'd bet money if neuroscience could capture the brain state. It just moves out of that busy, chattery, oh my goodness, da 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 part of the mind and goes into somewhere really deeper. What do you think?
I agree. I think that when you begin to delve into poetry, there's a silent question that it speaks even without words. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? That's the gap in the silence.
And those are the things we don't let ourselves do as compassionate people. We're busy focusing on what everyone else thinks, feels, needs. We don't let that quiet place be there and ask ourselves those questions.
And then sometimes, depending on how much you sit still or how much you listen to your heart, sometimes you could even hear that cry that says, I want or I need.
And will you be brave enough to listen to it and let it be heard?
Yeah.
There's deep emotional growth, deep power there. Would you share that poem? And how old were you when you wrote that poem, poetry?
Well, that one, I was probably between 17 and 19.
It blows my mind. There's so much power. I can never get sick of hearing you with that poem. It's so
Also because you're a poet too. You know how
I
it is.
one of the things I was thinking, I had a teacher who really encouraged poetry, and I remember finding that, and it's that same thing. You could listen. When you said the silence, I remembered that. I thought, yes, it's quiet when you go into the poetry space, and you never know what you're going to hear, but it just starts flowing out.
Almost like water or a river.
I've always thought it's like water, and it feels so good to let it out. And there it is on this paper, and you're like, wow, huh?
Sometimes it gives you a sense of joy or even a sense of pride. Like that came from me.
It does. Yes, it's so true. Or grief, even, but it feels good to let it out because it was sitting in there clogging everything up. And it needed to move.
I think it's just the aspect of releasing and having the permission to do so.
That's why I asked you to lead that call. Every single month, Taikeya does a poetry cafe at two different times. And in one sense, it might seem like, well, what does that have to do with boundaries? It's just a very fun way to practice using this voice, to practice listening to our needs, to practice listening to our dreams, our wants, And the reviews that come out of your call basically say that. Like, I can't believe how much, after attending 3 different ones, the difference between the way that voice was expressed that very first time showing up, giving oneself permission, compared to the third or fourth time, there's a massive difference, which is exactly why you're leading that call.
Thank you, Molly. I really thank you for the opportunity and just the community to do so because, in the world, there's only but so many. It's not that many programs like the boot camp that allows you to find out the difference between external and internal boundaries. I thought I had boundaries before I came to your program, but really I didn't have any idea of what it was. And I mean, I rave about this to myself. You ever had a conversation with yourself and even to other people that your program was the best expense that I ever did in my life? Like it literally
Oh,
changed the trajectory of my life and catapulted me in another level within my gifting. Because what more do you get in terms of investment or gift when you're able to see the different parts of you and embrace that? There was no other place that welcomed the anger except for my Abstract Voices program like yours.
wow. And that's exactly why it's here. There's so many amazing, compassionate people around the world. And what will happen if we all step fully into our power? Just kind of like whew, okay, stand back. It's such a joy. Okay, with that, now if you're driving, don't do this. But otherwise, if you are a listener, feel free to take a deep breath, shut your eyes, and let Taikeya's voice take you wherever your heart wants to go.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So this poem is called Poetry. So as long as I live, you will always be a part of me. It started probably the first time I recognized my heartbeat. I was hysterical hearing a noise come from me. The blood that pumped through my veins gave off a sound of chemistry. It was the distance of my heart versus the outside world that created a synergy for me to speak. So I took out a pen and scribbled within the lines of a sheet of paper and first called you poetry. Writing whatever was displayed through the screen of my eyes, I used my mind to project the picture of what I saw through you. We had great times when everything flowed freely and articulate myself clearly. The truth of how I was feeling. Bad days when nothing came and my thoughts remained shackled. I couldn't align my feelings into the form to tell a story. I was never one to blurt out lines without meaning. It was 2010 once I stumbled around the idea that you, poetry, and I were no longer friends. It seemed like we had run our last course. I prayed to God to restore you. You were lost and out of sight. I let you go. I almost gave up on you. Actually, I did, only for you to return and ask me, where did I go? I let you go. I guess I could have kept on writing, kept in contact, always trying to reach out. Poetry, you liberate minds, you help restore hearts, you give some an outlet to voice their opinions. You listen, you listen, you listen. You showed me the beauty when not being subjected to lines, the beauty in not trying to rhyme and letting the mind roam, creating a message, my message to place on my throne. Since day one, when you asked me what I'm thinking, you've been a listening ear, a friend I couldn't always find in the world. There was no judgment, just straight talk. With you, you helped me see that poetry is a riveting story of once was to one becoming and knowing thyself. Poetry, I love you. I love you. I love you.
It literally always makes me cry. Like,
Oh my gosh, Molly. Let me find out
so
poetry
good.
means so much to you as it does to me.
Those words just capture it, like finding truth and finding yourself and finding your voice. It's what I'm here for. So when you say that, it's like my song. And it's just there's so many different facets that we find ourselves, so many different ways we can find our voice, use our voice, discover who we are, right? I'd never wanna say there's only poetry. It's not like that. But poetry is incredibly accessible and not as complicated as maybe teachers of old made it seem like, or, it's for the regular people.
I think so many people think that poetry comes to judge them, but
Ooh,
instead it comes to give them an outlet.
you just nailed it. Because poetry is often introduced and taught in a structured, formal way, it becomes a classroom assignment that unless you happen to be very, very academic and love English or whatever, you're not gonna get it right. And even if you do, even if you happen to be academically gifted and love English, it's really easy to accidentally do it from an academic place whereby you miss the magic of it. There's something amazing about setting down in the stillness inside one's being and listening for the words that want to come forth from that place. And nobody is going to grade that, judge that. It literally doesn't matter. Whatever wants to come out gets to come out.
I absolutely agree with that. I think, like you said, poetry has beauty within it, but so does other forms of art. And to me, art within itself is like tasting food. It doesn't matter as much until you experience it, but when you do, you have different types of outcomes. And one of the outcomes that you can get with poetry is learning to fall in love with yourself, is learning to fall in love with the parts of you that other people tried to shame or tried to guilt trap, because you really get to analyze it, and not a way where you say, this is wrong, but where you get to say, oh, that's what you were thinking. That's what you were feeling. I hear you now. I see you now. You get to validate yourself.
Oh, that's absolutely it. Just the act of allowing it to happen is so validating. And then there's the bonus when you do pick it up and read it afterwards. And like what we were talking, sometimes it's like, I wrote that because it isn't coming from that cognitive thinking mind. Nothing against our cognitive thinking mind, but a lot of our healing doesn't happen there. It's coming from that deeper space, which is where our boundaries are. It's all connected. That's why I use a lot of art therapy style stuff and the teachings. It's how poetry flows so perfectly into what we're doing as well. And also, some of our listeners here might never come and work with me more closely inside the boot camp, but this is a tool for everybody everywhere. It's something that we can play around with and practice and see how it feels. One of the things that you and I've talked about and that you brought up before is poetry has a really uniquely powerful gift for us. When it's time for us to do ancestry work, when it's time for us to look at the patterns that have been laid by the people who went before, or by the things that happened to the people who went before is more like it. Poetry allows a safe way, kind of, a safer way to do some beautiful work on trauma that comes in from the past. You said you wrote a poem once related to your ancestry that actually wasn't allowed to be published because at the time it was a little too controversial, which was ridiculous. But do you mind sharing a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So my great great grandmother, that's my third generational grandmother, was a slave child. Throughout the years, like most families do, they share stories about the things that they experienced. But in my family, some of the stories that they shared were not something of days old. It was experiences that we continue to live through oppression, not necessarily having the same opportunities as other people, being a minority. I grew up in the South Bronx, and sometimes there would be, in terms of like other ethnicities, where they would look out for their family in terms of like jobs. And so it would be hard to like get a job. And just some of the things that my great grandmother talked about experiencing, So did my grandmother as well. So their struggle was always something that I felt innate, because I could relate to it within my generation, even with them being small and not being the same age as them, but everything they said made sense.
Well, and extra frustrating probably when the wider world is saying, "Everything's fine now. Yay! Slavery is over." Well, that's not actually the lived experience.
So true. And when you think about it in terms of like slavery, there's so many different belief systems that you have to come out of. So many different survival emotions that you have to come out of, like depression, like anxiety. A lot of my family members, unfortunately, didn't get a chance to come out of those emotions. So they had to work and provide while still trying to survive. In fact, my grandma, who I love dearly, that passed away in July, her motto was just keep the faith, but all you got to do is survive. My great great grandmother, who was third generation slave, some of her words actually trickled down even into, my generation. And so when I was 16 years old, I wrote a poem called Slavery Just Wasn't Our Game. Because there was this strong essence within me that just felt like it was wrong. And I don't think that it was just wrong in terms of feelings. I know logically that it was wrong as well, but I felt like I needed to take a stance. At the very ending of the poem, I talk about how I just want you to know that slavery just wasn't our game. And I stand here for all of my ancestors that could not speak. I was in high school. This wasn't the first high school that I told you guys about. I ended up moving from New York City to Pennsylvania, the ending of my 11th grade year.
That's a tough time to move for a baby, baby young adult, older teenager. That's tough.
Absolutely. I never thought I was going to go through a cultural shock, but I sure enough did.
If you are a compassionate person who knows you are here for more than keeping the people pleased, then this is your invitation. For 30 days, you are invited to step into a guided journey with me to rebuild your inner architecture of peace, power, and joy. This is not just a course, and it is not the typical way of approaching boundaries either. This is a door opening into a new way of being. When your nervous system learns the alchemy of safety, when your emotions find clarity, when your boundaries become your living structure, everything around you begins to shift. So if you've been longing for something real, something soul steady, and something that finally feels like you, come to boundaried.com. You can find the link in the show notes or type it into your browser, boundaried.com. Let the next 30 days be the solution your heart's been longing for.
Anyhow, we had to do a senior project. And I decided, you know what? It's my dream to always publish a book on poetry. Why not do that here? Because, they talked about the high school having their own publishing library and stuff like that. So I decided to do that. And I had an advisor, and pretty much the advisor was helping me edit my, poem, my book. And so she ended up taking it to the principal without telling me, once reading rather, the poem Slavery Just Wasn't Our Game. And when she came back, I was so shocked because one, I thought she would talk to me about it first before she went to the principal. And, I trusted her. And it's like, I was very vulnerable and transparent. And it's like, why would you do that? I would have liked to be there to advocate for myself, tell him what I thought and why I thought it should be heard. But nevertheless, she said, you can do every poem you want in the book, but you can't do this one. It's too strong of a language. And I don't think it serves you well.
Isn't that wild? You used your voice and it came out with power, and there was holy, holy rage in it. Something everyone can make space for to hear because it is part of the American experience. It needs to be heard. And what a message coming back to. I'm just thinking of, 17, 18-year-old Taikeya, really, with everything she's got going on, she's stepping into using her voice. She already is like, I'm going to be a published poet. And to get a turn down from the top authorities in that district, what impact did that have on you?
It made me question my voice in the sense of having to think twice on whether or not I felt people had the capacity to receive it.
I kind of love that in one sense. I hate that it happened, but that's pretty cool because what it could do for a lot of people would make them go, I must be saying it wrong or something wrong. She kind of said that in some ways. And what it did for you instead is you knew it was right. You were connected to your truth and your voice. It was more of a, am I safe to share my truth and my voice? Do you have the capacity to receive it? Or is there still a, limited ability there? That's pretty cool. It's sad that it had to happen, but it's still pretty cool that it wasn't inwardly focused.
But I think that it gave me an opportunity to continue to discover more about my voice and learn some things so that as I would get older, I begin to understand where I would take away power from other people. So sometimes you need your voice to be challenged in order to realize that it's your voice. Because if you always get from other people, then you'll never take the opportunity to say, no, I get to make the decisions on what I live and what I breathe and what I stand for. So, yeah, it was rough. Yeah, it made me question whether or not people had the capacity to receive it. Yeah, it also made me angry. And then, yes, it made me look at some of the teachers that I had in my former high school who were also Caucasian, and they received it well. But it made me dig more deeper into not only trying to understand the world, but myself.
That is so powerful. And you're so right. If we're always getting pats on the head, then we can end up using our voice, quote, quote, but it's actually still only because other people approve of it. And how powerful it is to sink down and to own our truth. There's a time and a place, and some people may or may not be ready to receive what we have to say. There's context, but our voice doesn't need permission to be our voice. Doesn't need outside permission, just needs our own. I can hear, some compassionate people might right now be saying, is it okay to be angry though? Is it okay to be, are we allowed to have those feelings? Like other people are allowed to be mad, but you and I, we know in the healing process, there is a place for anger. Would you talk a little bit about where or how that was part of your healing process?
So I think that God gave us emotions. And I think that every emotion that we have has a purpose. And I think that that has to be taught. But sometimes it's taught by the wrong hands or the wrong voices where people haven't necessarily healed in themselves or they use it to manipulate and abuse. And I bring that up because in so many different communities, you get shamed for having anger. But I think that there's a place for anger where you can embrace it because true anger that is righteous has a voice where it's saying that this is wrong. I love what you taught us in the boundary program that I matter and you matter. And so I think when anger rises up, it's an indication letting us know that our boundaries have been crossed. But if you're never taught about the different emotions, you don't realize that it's okay to have them. And I've come to find myself from even when I was younger and even as I've grown older, that emotions truly, like you say, are messages. As you begin to analyze the different emotions, Sometimes it helps you to realize something you've ignored that is vitally important and some things that you knew to be true, but you lowered your voice in order to please other people because you wanted to be loved or because you didn't want to be abandoned. You know, I found that happening with me, but there was a part of me that always felt like you're not going to disrespect me. And I would have this like saying, I'll give you two chances, but there's not a third. Because after the second chance, I know for sure that clearly you know what you're doing.
Oh, it wasn't an accident.
It wasn't an accident. And so for compassionate people, I think different emotions such as anger is a right. It's a birthright, but it's what do you do with it? Do you allow it to empower you to not only experience that you are a human being and that you have rights to dwell within this world as well? Or do you allow it to make you react as opposed to respond? Do you allow it to make you step outside of your truth and your overall goal and intentions of what you want to happen or to see or to be?
I think we see people who are angry all the time and then use their anger as a justification for abusive or bad treatment of others. And we're like, well, that's what anger does. I won't do that. So I can't be angry because if I let myself be angry, I'll do that kind of stuff. In reality, anger and all of those uncomfortable feelings, they are exactly as you said. And we're not going to do that. And bringing it all the way back to poetry, poetry is one way that makes it safe for us to listen to our anger and it lets it move through us and out in a way that doesn't hurt anybody. I mean, unless you wrote a really angry poem about someone and like taped it to their door, which don't do that. But other than that, it's such a great example of how to lovingly tend to our beautiful, beautiful emotions and maybe, just maybe, hear the message that's in them.
I agree. And you know what? I've come to love my emotions. I really have. I feel so empowered. I feel so grateful. I feel sometimes excited to like tell everyone that you can feel. I mean, because I knew before, even before being in boundary, but you've helped me embrace it in so many different ways that I know I don't have to have shame for having feelings.
Oh, it's so good. Um, you mentioned you had a poem to share and possibly a bit of an activity to invite our listeners to participate in. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
I have a poem called You Used to Dream. And you know what? I think dreams are important. I think so much of dreams tells us about who we are at our core. And sometimes in life, we go through experiences that makes us bury our dreams. But this poem here is really just a form of awareness. I would love to share it with you. And then maybe you could tell me what you think in the comments. And then also, I'll ask you a little bit of questions.
We'll put this podcast episode on my social media page on Becoming Boundaried and on at Boundary Bootcamp on Instagram so you guys can share your thoughts in the comments. All right, Taikeya, ready? And I feel like I should have some tissues just in case, but I'll just sniff.
You'll be all right.
It's good crying. I'm ready.
It was the glaze in your eyes, that passion in your talk that kept me believing and waiting to hear more. What happened to your fights? What happened to those throat-throbbing tears you held in about how much you deserved it? You stopped. You stopped trying. You stopped reaching. You used to dream. You used to stare in the sky thinking about what the future would hold. You held your dreams high, always in hand, never in the palm of another man's plans. You got me wondering about that little being inside of you. You were certain that no matter the naysayer, your extraordinary heart would never grow cold. This dream you was talking was never about you. You used to dream. You promised to never give up, nor never give in to the thought of ever settling. You meant it. You did. I knew it when you started telling me details of how life should be. You painted a picture so beautifully. It was clear your dream was meant to be here.
Oh, it's so good. No, I'm in heaven. I love it. Love this kind of stuff. It's interesting because we think, kind of back to what you're talking about when you were in high school looking at the news and we look at everything today and it's negative, 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 negative. Then we all have our own little dramas going on in our own lives. It's just really easy to get hooked into what sucks and why it's bad and how we're going to get out of this trap and how we're going to work through this problem. And there's a place for that. I'm not saying that there isn't, but we used to dream. On the last episode, I was talking with the amazing Melanie, and she's talking about this world that we are going to have to dream up. The solutions are coming. We have to start dreaming them. What kind of world do we want to make? And bringing this back to your poem, for both the individual and the wider world, we have got to start giving ourselves permission to dream.
Our imagination creates our reality. It's like if you stop dreaming, it's almost like you stop living. And so many people are wondering why they're not fulfilled and what's going on, why is so much evil prevalent in the world. But it's because we need so many more of us compassionate people that are standing up and creating what we envision, what we believe should be here, and grabbing people by the hand and saying, I love you. There's more for you. There's more to this life than what meets the eye. And thinking about that little being inside of you, childhood you, the childhood person of you that is so pure that believed that nothing was impossible is needed.
That little child was actually right. It's like the world beats it out of us. And we get covered up by layers and layers of sludge about why actually that's not true. And for compassionate people, our sludge includes got to keep the people pleased, got to make sure everyone's happy. Don't rock the boat. Don't take up too much space. Don't. There's no room for dreaming under all that. It's too much. Allowing ourselves to dream really helps break all that crusty stuff up. We got a lot of power inside of us.
And that's why I want to challenge the listeners to take a moment. If you got 20 minutes, it might sound like a lot, but you'd be amazed at how much you could hear within the silence of you sitting in a room, removing every distraction, and just allowing your heart to speak. And ask yourself, what dreams have I let go of that I knew that should be here, that is needed, that if I was to die tomorrow and I could talk to myself, I would say, girl, man, why didn't you do that? It starts with thinking about it. So would you think about it with us?
I think this is such a fun exercise. All right, 20 minutes. Everybody who's listening, myself included, will make it formal. Raise your right hand. Say, yes, I will take 20 minutes sometime today, tomorrow, the next few days, 20 minutes, as little distractions as possible, and just listen. And you know what? If you got a piece of paper and a pen and nothing comes out, fine. It's probably nice to have a 20-minute break in the silence. Sometimes the heart's like, meh, we'll see. It takes a little bit sometimes, but it won't surprise me one bit if in that 20-minute time period, if you ask yourself, what does my heart want to say about my dreams? A dream that maybe got left behind.
And you know what? Don't give up, because what you're doing in those 20 minutes is giving yourself the space.
Yes.
It's almost like giving yourself the opportunity to breathe. And even if it doesn't come within those 20 minutes, expect it to arrive at the moment that matters.
Exactly. You can't put expectations on it. You have to make space for it. And as soon as you remove the expectations of what if it doesn't rhyme? What if I don't do it right? I don't even know. As soon as you go, you know what? No expectations, 20 minutes, I'm just going to listen. That's usually when it begins.
I think also sometimes it's a part of learning to befriend yourself. When you do that with compassionate, you already have compassion. You begin to hear things and get to embrace what your heart really wants to say.
I'm really excited to hear what listeners are going to come up with in these 20 minutes. And if you do decide to post in the comments, you don't have to do that at all if you'd rather not. But if you do decide to share, just know that we will be reading with our hearts, Taikeya and I. There's no grades, there's no spell checks here. We're just interested and appreciating what your heart has to say.
Yes, yes, yes.
You got a master's degree in ministry and actually are a practicing minister. You also have a nonprofit called Abstract Voices. Would you tell folks a bit about Abstract Voices and where they could find you?
So, Abstract Voices, I started it in college at Wharton University to give people a general opportunity to express themselves. And it was really geared initially to poets, but then because I love arts, I began to let singers, writers, rappers come in, always with the majority of poets though. And so then I have this slogan that we still actually live by, and it's if you learn to take action of your voice, then you will learn to take action of your life. So with Abstract Voices, we give people an opportunity to like express themselves, to grow in their voice, to explore their emotions, and to analyze what truth is for them. And for more people who are interested in looking into Abstract Voices, they can go to abstractvoices.com every fourth Saturday between 2 p.m. and 3:30 Eastern Time. We have a writing session. Sometimes we go to the New York Poetry Festival and we perform. I select a couple of people. And then sometimes we do poetry cafes. But
Wow.
usually we do writing sessions.
I did not know this. I had no idea that you were doing writing. This is so cool.
You know, the thing about it is just like I said in my poem, that is always going to be a part of you, whatever your gifting is. And sometimes you might take a break, but there's going to be a point in time that is going to call you back. And so I'm calling the parts of you that want to be explored. I'm calling the parts of you that want to be heard. I'm calling the parts of you that are undecided and haven't figured it out yet. Because, we all haven't figured it out in one way or another, and we're consistently evolving. And so that's what Abstract Voices is really about, different voices, because we all have a different gift, talent, and offering to bring to the world. And if you're not sure what that is, there's no pressure for you to have to perform. It's just an invitation for you to be and to explore.
I love that so much. That's really beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing yourself with us, Taikeya. It was absolutely beautiful and a real pleasure to have you.
Molly, thank you so much for having me. I had such a great time on here. I think we could talk forever, but
We could. Everyone, you can look in the show notes for the link, but if you'd like to, you can type directly in your browser, abstractvoices.com. More information about Taikeya J is below in the show notes. And Taikeya and I cannot wait to hear your poetry. So I will put up a post on Becoming Boundaried. That's my Facebook page. And I will also put up that same post on Instagram at Boundaried Bootcamp. That's Boundaried with a D. So whether you're a Facebook person or Instagram person, pick your platform. And I'd absolutely love to hear your spoken word. And so glad that you could all join us today. My compassionate friend, I am so glad you're with us. We are the compassionate revolution. We are the change the world needs, and we're becoming it. If you loved this episode, please share it with a friend or give this podcast a 5-star review. I'd appreciate it so much. And if you'd like to get practical and work with me more closely on boundaries, you can come visit me at boundaried.com. That's boundaried with a D.com for amazing resources. Because this is how we do it. One action at a time. We are moving into our power. And I'm so proud to be in this movement with you.